The suffering that breaks you today is shaping who you will be tomorrow. That's not just a comforting phrase, it's a truth we often miss in the middle of our pain. When life feels like it's falling apart, when the job is gone, the relationship ends, or the loss feels too heavy to carry, it's easy to believe we're being destroyed. But what if this breaking is actually a form of building? What if the pain is chiseling away what no longer serves you, so the real version of you can finally emerge? This message is here to remind you, you are not alone, and your pain has purpose. Listen closely, not just once, but as often as your heart needs. And more importantly, practice the wisdom in your own life day by day. If something speaks to you today, pause and leave a comment below. It could be a word, a sentence, a memory. Don't overthink it. And if this message can help someone you love, don't hesitate. Share it. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next moment of clarity. Because healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in quiet steps, repeated daily. And you never know which moment will be the one that changes everything. One pain doesn't come to break you. It comes to awaken you. Pain doesn't schedule appointments. It arrives without warning, often at the exact moment we thought we were finally finding balance. Maybe it was when the relationship you invested in quietly collapsed, or when the career you built was erased with a single corporate restructure. Or maybe it came when you opened your inbox one morning to find a message that left you staring into silence, an ending you didn't see coming. At first, it feels like destruction. Your world tilts, the ground shifts, and you question whether you'll ever feel like yourself again. But if you look closely, you'll see that something else begins to stir underneath the rubble. A quiet urge to reevaluate, to look inward, and to question the path you were on in the first place. There's something about suffering that strips away noise. What felt urgent before suddenly loses its power. The meetings, the deadlines, the opinions of people who never truly saw you, they become irrelevant when you're brought face to face with emotional pain. And while it's easy to see that moment as the end of a chapter, what if it's actually the beginning of the real story? What if pain is less of an enemy and more of a messenger? One friend of mine used to work for a Fortune 500 company. On the outside, he had it all: title, salary, respect. But the day he was laid off without warning, he thought he had lost his identity. For weeks, he spiraled. But over time, something unexpected happened. In the stillness, he began drawing again, something he hadn't done since college. That rediscovered part of him led to freelance work, then a business, and finally, a life that reflected who he really was. As he once told me, losing that job didn't ruin my life, it returned me to it. That's the paradox most of us miss. What breaks your routine often awakens your purpose. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't see hardship as punishment, but as nature's way of forcing recalibration. They believed adversity wasn't something to avoid. It was the training ground of the soul. You don't learn endurance by walking a flat road. You learn it on steep terrain when your legs burn and your breath shortens, but you keep walking anyway. And the pain of that climb? It doesn't crush you. It conditions you. The idea that suffering shapes who you will become isn't just poetic. It's practical. Pain slows you down. And in that slowing, you begin to see the automatic patterns that once ruled your life. The way you constantly said yes to things that drained you. The way you avoided confrontation and called it kindness. The way you tied your worth to validation that could vanish overnight. These realizations don't come in moments of comfort. They surface when comfort is stripped away. And the best part? You don't need to fix everything all at once. The awakening that pain brings isn't about speed, it's about depth. It invites you to become more intentional, to sit with your feelings rather than rush to escape them, to accept that what once defined you no longer fits, and that it's okay to let go of identities that no longer serve your evolution. Pain, as unbearable as it feels in the moment, is often the only thing strong enough to push you into alignment with who you were always meant to be. It's the weight that cracks open the part of you that was asleep. And through that opening, light enters, not as a burst, but as a quiet presence, steady and honest. That's where transformation begins, not in the absence of pain, but in its embrace. So when you find yourself in the middle of what feels like a collapse, remember this: you're not being punished, you're being prepared. The version of you that will emerge tomorrow needs today's pain to be born. 2. When the world is silent, that's when you hear yourself the loudest. There are seasons in life when everything seems to slow down, not gently, but in a way that feels abrupt and uncomfortable. The texts stop coming. The phone doesn't ring. Your inbox, which was once flooded with notifications, now stays eerily quiet. Friends who once seemed inseparable now drift into silence. At first you panic. You refresh. You scroll. You wonder what went wrong. The silence feels like punishment. But if you stay in it long enough, something interesting begins to happen. That silence becomes space. Space to hear the one voice you've been ignoring the most, your own. This stillness isn't empty, it's spacious, and in that space, deeper questions rise to the surface. Am I living a life that's truly mine, or one shaped by what others expect of me? Have I been moving so fast that I've never stopped to ask where I was actually going? These questions don't arrive with trumpets or bright lights. They arrive like whispers, small, quiet thoughts that come when the noise fades. And they're the beginning of something powerful: clarity. One neighbor I once knew had this moment hit unexpectedly. His children had grown up and moved out. His wife, now exploring life after retirement, traveled more often. The house grew quieter. He said, "At first I tried to fill the silence with TV, with wine, with noise. But eventually, none of it worked. I had to face myself." What came next surprised even him. He picked up a notebook he hadn't touched in years and began writing. The first entries were short, even clumsy, but they were honest. And in that honesty, he found his way back to something that had always been part of him, just buried under a life of distractions. This isn't a rare story. It's simply one most people don't talk about, because we've been conditioned to associate silence with absence. If no one's texting, we assume we've been forgotten. If the group chat goes cold, we wonder if we said something wrong. But what if silence isn't about being rejected? What if it's an invitation? An invitation to reconnect with the parts of yourself you've neglected. To check in not with the world, but with your own soul? From a Stoic perspective, silence is never wasted. It's the ground where inner resilience grows. You don't build strength in applause, you build it in solitude. You don't discover your values by following the crowd. You discover them when you're standing alone. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that retreat isn't always found in mountains or nature, it's found within. But most people never go there because they fear what they'll find. What they forget is that within that solitude also lives their clearest wisdom. Silence can teach you what noise never will. It teaches you to notice, not just the world, but your reactions to it. You begin to see how quickly you chase distraction. You realize how uncomfortable stillness has become, and in that discomfort, you uncover your dependency on validation. That's not weakness, that's awareness. And from awareness, real transformation begins. You don't need to fear the quiet, because within that quiet lies your deepest questions, and surprisingly, your most honest answers. And while the world will eventually grow noisy again, you'll return to it differently. Less reactive, more rooted. That's the gift silence gives if you let it linger long enough. So the next time life gets quiet, resist the urge to fill the space. Stay, breathe, listen. Because the voice you're about to hear, your own, might just be the one that leads you home. 3. Every crack is a window where the light enters. A broken bowl mended with gold catches the eye, not because its surface is flawless, but because its fractures gleam. Japanese artisans call the craft kintsugi, and by filling each fault line with lacquer mixed with precious metal, they prove a radical idea that what shattered can become more beautiful than what was intact. The same principle holds for our lives. The disappointment you still replay at night, the relationship that collapsed, the regret that rises uninvited on quiet drives, each is a crack that refuses to vanish, yet each also invites light. Light that carries healing through pain, guides you on an emotional resilience journey, and reveals the deeper purpose in suffering the Stoics wrote about. Think of a father who built his identity on authority and achievement. When his son failed the college entrance exam, the facade fractured. At first, the man raged, certain the failure reflected poorly on him. Then the silence after the storm forced him inward. Something softened. He learned his son did not need a perfect resume to deserve love. and the father did not need a perfect child to feel proud. That small widening of the heart was gold in the crack, and it changed every conversation they shared afterward. In the Stoic approach to hard times, we do not erase damage, we study it, asking what strength it uncovers. Maybe your missed promotion exposed how much you tied your worth to a title, and in losing it, you gained freedom to explore work that aligns with your conscience. Maybe a divorce forced you into nights of aching loneliness, yet in that loneliness, you discovered the quiet skill of listening to your own thoughts, to friends who had stories you never slowed down to hear. Personal growth after hardship is rarely glamorous. It is repetitive, messy, slow, and it tests whether you truly believe that overcoming emotional pain is possible. Still, every time you decide not to hide the scar, when you admit the bankruptcy, the relapse, the panic attack, you turn the crack outward, where light can escape and where other struggling people can recognize themselves. That recognition is powerful. It tells them they are not defective, only unfinished. And unfinished is a hopeful place to be, because it means life can keep pouring gold. Spiritual strength through struggle is forged precisely here, at the meeting point between vulnerability and acceptance. The moment you stop pretending the ceramic is whole, you create space for rebuilding after failure and for transformation through adversity. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that nothing nature creates is ugly. Therefore, nothing life breaks is beyond redemption, provided we cooperate with the repair. You cooperate by refusing to label yourself permanently damaged. You cooperate by retraining the mind to see each painful memory as lacquer that will one day set and shine. You cooperate by letting others witness the process, because humanity learns courage vicariously. Someone who watches you stand amid shards may feel permission to gather their own. Over time, the patched places form a map of where you have been and what you have survived. They testify that resilience is not the absence of fractures, but the artful incorporation of them. So the next time a piece of your story chips off, resist the urge to sweep it under the rug. Hold it up, examine its edges, mix in the gold of honesty, humor, and hard-won wisdom, then fit it back where it belongs. The bowl may never look factory perfect again, yet it will tell a richer story. And anyone who sees it will understand that beauty is not in seamlessness, but in seams that sparkle. 4. Rebirth always begins in ruin. Trees sprout only after the brutality of winter. A new house rises only once the old foundation is demolished. Likewise, the human spirit often awakens only when everything familiar has collapsed. My friend learned this the hard way when a sudden divorce stripped him of house, savings, and confidence in a single court hearing. He moved into a bare-bones apartment, furnished with nothing more than a mattress and a scarred wooden desk, and night after night, he sat in that silence, reading, journaling, breathing, noticing the ache in his chest. Friends wondered where he had gone because he vanished from social media, yet in truth, he was embarking on an emotional resilience journey no camera could capture. At first, every page he wrote trembled with anger, but gradually the words cooled, then clarified, until he could see the rubble for what it was, fertile ground. He realized, almost with surprise, that healing through pain is less like patching a wall and more like turning soil, disruptive yet essential. There is a reason Stoics speak of fire as both destroyer and purifier. They accept ruin not as a cosmic mistake, but as a stage in the larger process of transformation through adversity. When you lose what you thought defined you, the mind rebels, demanding an instant fix. Yet the wiser part of you knows that rebuilding after failure cannot be rushed. Strength, like bone, grows back denser at the fracture. Every dawn, my friend brewed coffee, opened his notebook, and asked the same question. What is the purpose in suffering if I refuse to waste it? That question kept him from slipping into self-pity, and over months it guided him towards small, concrete acts, volunteering at a food bank, training for a 10K, mending a strained relationship with his brother. None of these steps erased his grief, yet each one proved that overcoming emotional pain is possible when you move, however slowly, towards service and discipline. There came a morning when he noticed new routines had taken root. Early runs before sunrise, quiet evenings free of television, conversations conducted without the need to win or impress. He no longer chased validation. He listened, responded, let silence stretch. The Stoic approach to hard times had reshaped him into a man who could hold discomfort without flinching, who could sit in a room once filled with memories and feel gratitude rather than loss. Personal growth after hardship looks like that. Subtle but unmistakable, a steady reclaiming of agency. What changed on the outside? Eventually, he found a new place to live, yet the real renovation occurred within. The clutter of old identities, husband, homeowner, successful guy, had been cleared away, leaving space for spiritual strength through struggle. One evening, months after the divorce was final, he invited a few friends over. We expected an awkward gathering, but he greeted us with calm eyes and easy laughter, telling stories about beginning guitar lessons, learning to cook, and reading philosophy. He spoke of sorrow plainly, then pivoted to wonder, describing how solitude had taught him to hear rain on the roof again, how he now noticed the smell of pine on morning runs. The man who once measured worth by achievements now measured it by presence. His story is not unique. It only illustrates a principle you may already feel rumbling beneath your own disappointments. Ruin is not the end of the narrative. It is the clearing of the stage before the second act. If life has burned down around you, resist the reflex to rebuild the exact structure that fell. Instead, sift through the ashes, honor what still matters, discard what never did, and let the scorched earth rest until new shoots appear. Because rebirth always begins in ruin, and if you lean into that fact, if you allow the old frame to remain toppled while you explore unfamiliar possibilities, you will find strength in suffering and emerge not patched together but fundamentally remade, ready to stand in a life constructed on purpose rather than on habit. 5. What cripples you today will empower you tomorrow. Think back to the last time you whispered, maybe even screamed, "I can't take this anymore." Perhaps it was the night a loved one left and the silence felt loud enough to crack your ribs, or the afternoon a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity slipped away and you watched the door close without the strength to pull it back open. Or maybe it was a gray morning when fatigue pinned you to the mattress and even breathing felt like lifting iron. In that instant, you were certain the weight would crush you for good. Yet here you are, still standing, proving that the very pressure meant to cripple you can become the force that carves new muscle into your character. Suffering does not grant superpowers in a single jolt. Instead, it begins a slow, deliberate healing through pain, teaching you precisely where your limits lie and how to stretch them without snapping. You learn to sort essential from optional, noise from necessity, and with every emotional resilience journey you survive, you gain a sharper instinct for spotting chaos before it swallows you. One former colleague of mine used to tremble at the thought of public speaking. Panic attacks locked his throat, and any stage felt like the gallows. Years later, he trains audiences of hundreds in communication skills, not because the fear vanished, but because he marched through it often enough that the terrain became familiar. Now when a participant admits they dread stepping up to the mic, he responds with warmth no textbook can teach, because the memory of his own dread still pulses beneath the calm. Transformation through adversity rendered him trustworthy. That is Stoic alchemy at work. The Stoic approach to hard times that refuses to label fear or grief as permanent handicaps. Instead, it calls them raw material. Stoicism suggests that you do not merely endure difficulties, but actively convert them into assets. The way a blacksmith forges shattered iron into a blade stronger than fresh steel. So the layoff that once tripped your finances may later become the very story that persuades investors to back the business you built from scratch. The heartbreak that once left your chest hollow could evolve into the empathic insight that deepens every friendship that follows. Purpose in suffering is not a poetic afterthought. It is the hidden engine driving personal growth after hardship. And when you recognize that engine, you begin to steer rather than be dragged. Critically, empowerment does not announce itself with fanfare. It reveals itself in subtleties. One morning, you notice the email that would have ruined your day last year now registers as a mild inconvenience. A traffic jam that once detonated anger becomes a pocket of unexpected reflection. You see others still tangled in the web that once trapped you, and instead of judgment, you feel a quiet urge to guide. because overcoming emotional pain has widened your sightline. As the Stoics knew, it is impossible to teach calm if you have never sat in the center of a storm. Yet once you have weathered one, even a stranger senses it in your tone. That intangible credibility, spiritual strength through struggle, cannot be faked, and people gravitate toward it like travelers spotting a lamplight on a dark road. Therefore, the next time you feel yourself buckle under a burden that seems unlivable, pause and remember that today's collapse can seed tomorrow's competence. Let the panic pass through your body without pretending it is pleasant, yet refuse to let it define the narrative. Acknowledge the fracture, then set about rebuilding after failure, one deliberate move at a time. With repetition, the task that felt like shackles becomes your signature skill. The story that once brought shame becomes testimony. The limit that once screamed stop becomes a milestone marking how far you have come. Eventually, you will look back at the weight that pinned you down and realize it sculpted the resilience that now holds you upright. And when someone else reaches the edge where you once stood, you will be able to say with unshakable calm, "I know that cliff, and there is firm ground just beyond it." Because what crippled you yesterday has become the very strength that empowers both you and everyone who meets you tomorrow. 6. You don't need to understand, you just need to endure calmly. Modern life trains us to chase explanations the way children chase fireflies. Yet there are stretches of suffering where the jar stays stubbornly empty and the darkness feels total. We ask, why did the business we nurtured collapse just when it looked ready to thrive? Why did the biopsy return positive when the scans last year were clear? Why did the partner who once promised forever lose interest the moment we let our guard down? These questions are natural, but the Stoic approach to hard times reminds us that answers often lag behind experience, and the mind that demands a reason right now seldom finds one worth resting on. In these uncertain gaps, understanding is a luxury, endurance is a necessity. Picture a sudden storm on a forest trail. The sky turns slate, rain slaps the leaves, and every shortcut disappears into mud. You can curse the weather. You can shout at the clouds. None of it keeps you dry. The only way out is forward, one soaked step after another, tracking the faint path that glistens under sheets of water until, almost without noticing, you reach tree cover and the rain eases. You still do not know why the cloud chose that moment to rupture, but you are out of the storm because you kept moving. That simple decision, to walk even while confused, illustrates how to find strength in suffering. Movement, not explanation, carried you to safety. Enduring calmly does not mean numbing out. It means refusing to waste precious energy wrestling questions that have no present answers. The Stoics compared such restraint to steering a ship through fog. Focus on the next wave. Trust that the coastline exists even if it is invisible, and let the wind reveal the landmarks when it chooses. This mindset fuels healing through pain because it keeps the heart steady while the mind recalibrates. People who practice it discover that emotional storms burn hot but briefly when starved of frantic analysis. So rather than spiraling over what-ifs, they anchor in small certainties. Breath in, breath out. One honest conversation, one nourishing meal, one act of kindness. These humble rituals form the backbone of an emotional resilience journey and offer practical steps for overcoming emotional pain without collapsing under its weight. Consider the father whose teenage son is diagnosed with depression. The man researches causes, diets, therapies, desperate for a single culprit he can vanquish. Yet every professional reminds him that recovery is rarely linear. Finally, exhausted, he stops interrogating the universe and starts showing up, driving his son to appointments, cooking dinner, sitting in comfortable silence during long evenings. Months later, the boy's eyes lightened. Progress emerged not from perfect knowledge, but from patient presence. Illustrating the purpose of suffering, it teaches relationship over reasoning and action over anxiety. This shift from explanation to endurance also sparks personal growth after hardship. Athletes rehabbing from injury learn early that obsessing over why the tendon tore helps less than mastering each incremental stretch. Entrepreneurs rebuilding after failure gain more by refining their product than by replaying the moment investors walked away. In every field, the pattern holds. Clarity follows perseverance, not vice versa. Thus, transformation through adversity unfolds quietly, like dawn edging across a skyline, revealing how spiritual strength through struggle was forged while the night still felt endless. Endurance, of course, does not forbid reflection. It simply schedules it for later, when adrenaline subsides and perspective widens. Then, with calmer eyes, we often glimpse threads of meaning that panic obscured. The layoff that nudged us toward more purposeful work, the illness that deepened empathy, the detour that introduced friendships otherwise impossible. These insights, harvested in their own season, become maps we hand to others lost in similar fog. In sharing them, we convert survival into service, proving again that rebuilding after failure is less about brilliant answers than about resilient examples. Therefore, when the next storm descends and explanations scatter like startled birds, remember the lesson of the forest rain. Accept the wet, feel the cold, keep walking. Each deliberate step is a quiet vote of confidence that life keeps truths in reserve until we are ready. One day, sunlight will filter through the branches, and you will see the path behind you soaked in silver light, proof that you did not need perfect understanding, only the calm courage to endure. 7. The story you're writing might be someone else's lifeline. Somewhere, right now, a stranger is scrolling through endless headlines, wondering if anyone has ever felt as lost as they do. And the answer, though they can't see it, might be hidden in the chapter you're living. It is tempting to treat your setbacks as private clutter, to sweep the broken pieces under the rug and present only polished victories, yet that instinct steals oxygen from healing through pain, both yours and others. The Stoic approach to hard times reminds us that personal growth after hardship is never solitary. It ripples outward the moment you speak honestly. Picture the former drinker who once woke up shaking, convinced he'd ruined every chance at a decent life. Rather than sealing that memory behind a grin, he chose candor. He told new friends about the nights he couldn't remember, the mornings he could scarcely stand, and he admitted the shame that clung to him like smoke. Because he spoke without varnish, people in quieter spirals recognized themselves and stepped closer, asking how to find strength in suffering. He was no therapist, no celebrated guru, yet his raw narrative offered a map more practical than academic advice. If he could stagger into sobriety, perhaps they could too. Your own missteps carry the same latent power. The unpaid debt you wrestled down, the rejection letters you pinned above your desk, the divorce papers you signed trembling, each episode contains hard-won data on overcoming emotional pain. And someone out there is starving for that data right now. Moreover, narrating your struggles out loud consolidates spiritual strength through struggle. It obliges you to frame chaos in coherent sentences. And coherence breeds clarity. It also punctures the illusion that success is linear. When you reveal the zigzags, the layoffs that preceded the launch, the panic attacks that predated the keynote, listeners discover that rebuilding after failure is not a glitch in the system, but the system itself. Such a realization can jolt them off the edge of despair, because nothing is more corrosive than believing one's mess is unique and therefore unfixable. Still, sharing authentically is not about spotlighting wounds for applause. It is about offering context so others can calibrate their own expectations. A marathoner does not inspire beginners merely by crossing the finish line. The real electricity hums in the miles where shoes blistered and lungs burned. Likewise, your testimony's voltage surges in the honest middle where you almost quit. That vulnerable middle teaches the listener how transformation through adversity actually feels. Uncertain, slow, peppered with doubt, and that lesson is a lifeline. Even so, bravery in storytelling requires boundaries. You choose what details serve the listener, rather than reliving trauma for spectacle. Transparency is courageous, but it is not reckless exhibition. It is measured generosity, rooted in purpose and suffering. The conviction that pain redeemed through perspective becomes communal medicine. When you first speak, you might sense tremors of embarrassment. Yet notice how quickly those tremors settle the moment someone replies, "Me too." That phrase slashes isolation in half and launches an emotional resilience journey for both parties. Suddenly, the air grows lighter. What felt like a private burden becomes shared weight, easier to carry. Over time, repeated exchanges like these weave an invisible safety net across workplaces, neighborhoods, and even online forums. A culture forms where people trade stories of survival, the way travelers trade maps, and every new voice adds another route out of the dark. Therefore, if you are sitting on a story, perhaps a bankruptcy you think disqualifies you, or a season of depression you fear will label you weak, consider the possibility that withholding it robs someone of direction. Stoicism's strength is not proved by never falling, but by rising, and then describing the climb so others can follow. Speak when you're ready, neither too polished nor too raw, and trust that your imperfect account may land in the exact inbox of someone teetering on the decision to keep going. In doing so, you transform private scars into public bridges, proving that the meaning of any ordeal expands the moment it becomes a beacon for another soul still wandering in the storm. Suffering has a strange way of introducing us to who we really are. What feels like the end is often the start of a deeper, more honest version of ourselves. When life cracks us open, it also lets the light in. Whether you're healing through pain, rebuilding after failure, or simply learning how to endure calmly, every step counts. Remember, your journey isn't just about you. It might be someone else's roadmap to resilience. So take a breath, look at how far you've come, and trust that purpose often hides inside hardship. If this message spoke to you, share your story in the comments below. Your voice could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you haven't already, like this video and subscribe for more insights on overcoming emotional pain, personal growth after hardship, and the Stoic approach to hard times. Together, we rise, one quiet triumph at a time.